Welcome back to Without a Doubt, the podcast where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We're the ones who believe in creating our own paths and living our truths out loud. Join in on an honest and open conversation about self-discovery and growth. I'm your girl Mad, your host, and your sprinkle of reality, and I'm here to remind you that it's okay to do life different, that you don't have to be what is expected of you, and that your happiness matters. And yes, even us baddies who know this need this reminder too. I was just thinking while I was recording this, my mom literally stopped me last time. I was recording this with her and she said, "You read that every time?" And so far, yes, I do. I do have them pre-recorded, but for some reason, it just sounds better for me to do this every time. So yes, I do read this every single time. Welcome to episode number 16. Yeehaw. I just said yeehaw. And we are here. I'm super happy. I'm going to actually start off this episode by talking about my dad. Ironic because last episode was about my mom, my BFF, my little pea in a pod. And she is someone that I have boundaries with, but I believe my boundaries and how I go about them heavily stems from my relationship with my dad. Creating boundaries is hard. It makes you feel bad sometimes, but you have to hold strong. Creating boundaries can help you create peace. It'll help you protect peace, but it can also make you feel like a dumpy, selfish person. As you get older, and as I've gotten older, I learned what I will and what I will not tolerate. And that is essentially the keys and basics of boundaries. Knowing what you will or won't allow in your bubble and how you go about it when the lines feel blurred. It's about human response and protecting your own peace. And as these episodes have progressed, this might be my hardest episode to record and share. It peels back a very vulnerable layer of who I am in my relationships, who I am as a person, my thoughts, beliefs, and how I've even survived this life journey so far. Creating this episode and recording it just feels hard because I too have boundaries, like how much I'm actually willing to share and how much do I really want to give myself. Like, to most people, you might think I'm pretty transparent and raw, but I'm really great at masking who I am despite wearing my heart on my sleeve. That is very true. I act very strong, even though a lot of times I feel weak. Maybe I still am strong, and that's just my limiting belief. And I do know essentially how to make myself bigger in a room when I feel like a small little person in a room. Believe that or not, in a crowded room, somehow I can feel so alone. In this episode, I'm going to talk negatives and positives to boundary making, but I'm also going to share how to create healthy boundaries so that you can maybe take something into your little brain toolbox and level up this human experience. Maybe one of my very first boundary making calls that I can even remember was telling my dad not to call me anymore. This is a hard story. I was telling my dad not to call me anymore. There was a time in my life that my dad actually took me to a crack house, yes, and he did end up going back to prison. He had been in and out pretty much my whole life that he was alive. I had to create boundaries time and times again, but I remember always putting them back into place. The very first boundary we can talk about is when my dad lost his job with my aunt. He blamed me for losing his job, and I remember I wasn't going to be spoken to in that way at 13 years old by a grown man who lost a job over drug addiction. And then my dad was in prison. I remember he would call me and, at that point he was still kind of blaming me for why he was in jail or why he got in trouble. And maybe I never even told my mom these things, but I didn't want to talk to him for a while, so I wouldn't talk to my dad. And then about 6 months before my dad died, I remember he was calling me throughout the whole night, and it was multiple times throughout the night, just desperate for me to send him money. I lied to protect my own energy and peace. I told him, I'll get up in the morning, I'll transfer money to Western Union. But I really didn't plan to do that. I actually knew he wanted the money for drugs. And after that time, I just stopped talking to him. And months later, my dad passed away in a tragic car accident, actually on December 27th. So we're coming up on his anniversary here, death anniversary. It was a hard time because I battled my own boundaries. Especially it's hard to understand this if you haven't already lived an experience of a parent with drug addiction. Creating these boundaries with my dad might have really been the catalyst to how I create my boundaries now. I hold my boundaries pretty tight, yet I allow them to loosen for certain people, and it could be due to the fact that my dad did pass away without any resolution with the hard boundaries I actually created. And the lack of communication due to that makes me not want to lose other people and with really tight boundaries. God forbid somebody passes and I don't talk to them or I don't do this. I tend to want to keep some of my boundaries a little looser. I know, we all need therapy, right? Welcome to my podcast. I do talk about my dad a lot, which is going to come up again more times than I realize because he holds such a strong place in my heart. He made a lot of people create hard boundaries. He was a great person, but he made people do these things so that they had to protect themselves from his bad decisions. There's a ton of negatives when you have to set up boundaries. And I feel like most likely why we don't really want to talk about or set up boundaries is because they do tend to hurt not only us, but other people. Let's talk more about the negatives of boundary making, and thank you for listening to my sad ass story about my dad, but do not let the pity sit there. This was not a pity party. This was a welcome to my vulnerable pullback layer. Let's talk about the first reason why it is hard to deal with these boundaries. If you're not communicating properly and there's poorly communicated boundaries, unclear expectations, they're going to lead to misunderstandings with you and others. And I think that's why it's really important to be clear or even be vocal about what you want or how your boundaries are established. This is a really good example, and this is one that came to mind right away because my cousin just moved here like maybe 6 weeks ago. And her and her baby lives 7 minutes from me, literally 7 minutes. And we're both stoked about it. But I think I've mentioned to her time and time before that I actually have a lot going on. I have this podcast, I have my reselling business, Kendra has an Etsy business. We go to the gym, I see my grandma once a week, my other grandma wants in on lunch, I've got my mom that we hang out, I walk the dog, like family. There's always something going on, right? I don't feel like I'm ever sitting around. I think people probably think that about me, but my cousin knows this about me because I tell her and express to her, I'm very vocal, like I am busy, I have a life. And she could have easily moved here and been so fucking annoying, which I think a lot of people thought that's how it was going to be. Like, Madison's going to be so annoyed of so-and-so so fast. But the truth is, she respects my boundaries because I've spoken up and I'm vocal about it. I think it's important that when you are establishing your boundaries, people think like, oh, I'm putting up my boundaries, this is going to be negative. But I think if you're vocal and you can be clear about it, you're going to eliminate the miscommunication. It's super duper important. And that is why the first thing is like comes to mind, why the negative with the whole thing with your whole negatives come into play when we're talking about this boundary making, because putting up the boundaries is going to be hard, but if they don't know the boundaries, it's going to be even harder. Do you get what I'm saying? If you're setting these strict boundaries, we're going to hit these hard, like the whole negative side of boundaries, right? A lot of times people think you're going to set up these boundaries and these boundaries are hard, rigid, concrete walls, but they're not. Boundaries are meant to be a little pulled and bent, and some people will create these boundaries and think like, okay, I need to be isolated. I'm going to put myself into like this little lonely bubble. And it's important to find a balance. Like, you need to protect your own well-being and maintain meaningful connections. Sometimes we corner ourselves or we push things away when we create boundaries because we start thinking like, this is a boundary. No. Like, this is more so like an invisible line in your ideas of what you will and won't tolerate. Those are your boundaries, right? That doesn't mean you have to do shit by yourself or totally remove yourself from the equation. Like, we need other humans. I say this like every other episode. Isolation is not boundaries. If your boundaries are too rough, too rigid, you may find it hard to accept help from others, and that's going to lead to feelings of self-reliance and prevent you from building supportive relationships. Hello, that is me. Welcome to my life. I have created some fucking hard-ass boundaries. Imagine this. You're a wrestler. You're in that big ring box with the ropes that have the lines. You know what I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure it's just called a ring. You know, the ones that have and give a little bit of flexibility and it looks like it bounces you back to the ring a little bit. Imagine that. Those are your boundaries. And sometimes they're going to stretch a little bit. Sometimes they're going to bounce you to the other side. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to even go out of your own boundaries. You're going to fall out of the ring. The boundaries will be crossed and will be broken. When you have a hard time receiving support, and the boundaries like that, they're going to start to feel like a concrete wall. No bounce, no slack, no give, no wrestling ring. Just a hard rock boundary. And you really don't want to let shit in at that point. The walls of your ring are no longer 3 ropes, but a 6-foot wall that you have built. And those are your walls. Those are your boundaries. Those are the hard, firm ones that a lot of times we start to push people out that they have to climb out on their own. They can't even fucking get in. And those are the people right there, like me, who create a wall, and we struggle with asking for help. I'm getting better, I know. I create the walls, I'm working on creating a ring, I get you, but it's a stubborn act of boundaries. And if there's one thing that I've learned, we all need support, we all need help, we've got to break down the walls, and we need a hand. We need a tap in from our, that Monday night double down WWE There's two people, I hand tap you in. You know what I'm talking about, right? I had two brothers growing up, so. We're also going to talk about how boundaries can be extremely rigid and they can actually hinder your personal growth if you have those concrete wall boundaries. The ones we were just talking about where they're solid, they're going to create you from getting out of those walls and out of your comfort zone. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's important to be open into new experiences and opportunities while still maintaining your boundaries. Like the invisible lines, yeah, they're there. That concrete wall is going to keep you boxed in, and that's not going to get you anywhere. Bringing back that wrestling ring rope, the wrestling rope ring, that whole wrestling, you know what I'm saying, that whole mentality of being in that ring with the balance. We want more of it. We all want success, whatever that is to you, but it's not going to be done within 4 concrete walls. Some individuals are also going to perceive setting these boundaries as selfish or being uncooperative. Hello, that's also me. Raise your hand if that is you too. Yes, that is me. If I had a freaking dollar for every time somebody said I was selfish or holding tight to my boundaries or uncooperative or just sticking to my guns in that moment, yes, I know. It is important to communicate your boundaries in a respectful and considerate manner to avoid that perception. And I just think sometimes it's going to be hard to avoid that in general. It's not always going to work. And here's your reminder that you don't have to necessarily align with that thought process. Not everything you're going to do, agree with, vice versa, is going to be that way. What matters to you and what holds the most value to you is what you're going to protect, and that's with your own boundaries. Sometimes our boundaries are going to feel harsh or negative to other people when it's a positive shift for us, and vice versa. It might feel harsh to us and positive for other people. Let's talk about the positive side. Increase self-respect. Number 1, baby. Let's set and enforce the boundaries. Like, show the value to yourself and your needs. Setting those boundaries is going to promote self-respect and self-growth. Self-worth is going to pop out of nowhere. You're going to prioritize your own well-being. It is not selfish to put yourself first if you can. Help others when it's needed and you're able. Say it again. It is not selfish to put yourself first if you can. Boundaries can help protect mental and emotional well-being. They're going to prevent others from taking advantage of you, causing unnecessary stress, infringing upon your personal space. Hello, you're going to communicate them, they're going to know them, and they're going to step on back because they're not in that boundary, right? Creating those is what's going to help lead to reduced anxiety, improved emotional stability, and overall happiness. Hello, that's what we all want, right? I know if you ever feel pulled in like a million directions, knowing your boundaries is what's actually going to keep stability within your life. And keeping ourselves afloat is crucial in this world at times where I know a lot of us feel like we're drowning. If you hear a cute little chirp chirp in the background, no, I did not add that in. It is my bird that I never take out of here for some reason, but I guess she enjoys this podcast chat as well. Clear boundaries can also help you improve the quality of your relationships. They're going to provide a framework, a nice solid wrestling ring, right? It's the framework. It is the ring itself. It's going to foster mutual respect and understanding, and these boundaries are also going to help define expectations and promote open communication. I like open communication, which will lead to a more fulfilling and balanced relationship. Hello, we want that. We want balance. If you listen to my last episode, you may have even heard me talk about with my mom how I pop off. And yes, this is true. I do that. This is when my boundaries are usually being stretched and possibly feeling broken. I'm either allowing my boundaries to be pushed to the limits, crossed. Definitely for sure in these moments, I realize I need to reel myself back in. But at this point, I've probably already popped off and I need to actually get thrown back into place. And it's just like a reset to my mom, even myself, that we both need to get back into our own lanes. Family is definitely the hardest boundary I have, and that might be true for you too. Time after time, my boundaries and their boundaries are broken, and they are meant to be broken. Boundaries will be broken, they will be reassessed, and they will be reset. Nothing is wrong with that. But what is important is maintaining solid feel-good bonds with your family, relationships, and just learning and having a better understanding of one another. By setting your boundaries around your time and energy, this is also going to help prioritize your tasks and activities that align with your goals. And for me, I'm a freelancer, so I need to make sure this is possible. It's going to allow you to focus on what truly matters to you and avoid distractions or other excessive demands from your family, right? A lot of these times they pull you away. I mentioned I'm a freelancer. I don't have a 9-to-5. I have to hold on to my boundaries tight so that I can actually get my work done. If you are holding true to that, the rewards can be tremendous, but so much in this process, it's only possible with your boundaries. Let's move into self-care, because if you establish boundaries, it's going to obviously encourage you to have better self-care practices, right? It's going to make you feel better in your bubble. It's going to give you permission to prioritize your physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Setting the limits on what you handle or by saying no when it's necessary, it's going to avoid the burnout, and it's going to help you maintain a better work-life balance or family, friendship balance, whatever balance you need. When I'm talking about boundaries, I'm also not just talking about people and relationships. Rather, we're really just talking about the ideas about work, hobbies, new interests, drugs even, money. How far is too far? How much is too much? And you have your boundaries in everything you hold important. An example for me is like, I like to smoke weed, right? But I don't do other drugs. I don't even like to take ibuprofen. That's a medication, right? That's a drug. I've done shrooms. I have done Molly, but I haven't done Coke. That's like too far for me. That's my own boundary and my own wrestling ring of things that I have created, right? My little bounce around of what I feel comfortable in. We all create them and we all hold these things close. I don't know why I felt the need to talk about the drug thing, but I feel like that's a good thing because a lot of people talk about how marijuana is like a gateway drug to other things, but I'm not interested in other drugs. My dad was a drug addict. I don't like pills. I don't even want to take things that make my cramps go away when I have my fucking period. So you imagine that, okay? I just want to have a good ass time, come back down to earth sometimes because I'm literally living like on another planet. Welcome to my life, okay? Well, but welcome to my podcast. I think I've said that like 3 times, and I did mention this is probably going to be my most vulnerable podcast, did I not? So far, probably. So here we are. My last one was the least edited, and this one is more in the mind of Madison. Well, anyway, in my own boundaries, we all create them, and how we hold them and execute them, and the ideas around the boundary is ultimately going to lead you to whatever that end result is, wherever you want to go. It is so important to note that, like, while your boundaries can have positive effects, they're going to also require ongoing communication, adjustments. Like I said, resetting is okay. It is a continuous process of self-reflection and just maintaining healthy boundaries that align with whatever your evolving needs are. Things change. We shouldn't stay stagnant. You should not be the same person. You know what? Maybe you could be the same person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I'm ever evolving, and I don't think that anything's wrong with that. I think my boundaries are ever changing because who I am and what I want is also ever changing. So reset, realign, and do you, baby boo. Creating boundaries is an important aspect of maintaining whatever healthy relationships you need in your life, but also maintaining your personal well-being. I'm going to share finally the last few things of this podcast and just a few tips, steps, or things you can do in order to establish boundaries. I think first and foremost, self-reflection always needs to take place. You have to understand your own needs, your own values, and your own limits. Like, reflect on what actually makes you feel comfortable or uncomfortable in different situations. Like, you are 100% allowed to say no. You don't have to do shit. Number 2, identify the boundaries. Like, determine what specific boundaries you want to set in different areas of your life. Like I mentioned, it's not just relationships. It's not just friendships. But like your personal time, space, emotions, your values, the boundaries around your morals. Consider the physical, your emotional things. And I really think this is like a good time to think about this, you know? Identify what boundaries you're going to hold true. Recently, I decided I was no longer allowing bullshit in my life or people to talk negatively about me if I know, or just to feel unwanted places. Recently, I had to lay down a little bit of the bitch Madison on my family member. After she was kind of going around complaining and negatively talking about me, about decisions I made regarding a gift swap, I decided to opt out, and I plan to participate in the whole day, bring food. Shit, I even had chocolates for my cousins and cards, but you know what? Someone had an issue that I didn't want to be a part of the gift swap. Once I heard that through the grapevine and all the little birdies were chatting, and so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that, I just texted so-and-so and decided to revoke my invitation and kept my happy ass out of the holiday gift swap. And let me tell you, the JOMO I had, you know, the joy of missing out. It's not FOMO for me. I have JOMO, yes. Because I refuse to be spoken negatively about when I kindly and honestly spoke out to the one person that I didn't want to participate. And then you have to go out and squawk about me behind my back. Once I had that shitty notion about you talking about me, my boundary lines went up. and what I will and won't tolerate was laid the fuck down. And one thing about me, I do what I want and I follow what feels best for me. I really did pop off on this said person. I reeled myself in and protected my own boundaries by staying home. It wasn't easy for me, to be honest, and I'm sure it was really hard for them as well. We also need to make sure we're communicating assertively. Probably the way I popped off on that so-and-so person wasn't good. It wasn't probably respectful. But you need to make sure you're communicating your boundaries. Use I statements. Express your needs. Like, being vocal is not a bad thing. I want to really say these are two things that I think are important things. Write these down. Put these in your notes. Jot these down. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, okay? And 2, it's always a no unless you ask. Save those 2 little things. Those are probably 2 things I use all the time. I say those often. We also need to be aware of our limits, recognize when your boundaries are being crossed like they were before or violated. Trust your instincts, take action, be vocal, and protect your fucking boundaries. They're there for a reason, right? You're allowed to back off and do what's necessary to regain your boundaries, to take control. Protect yourself like I did this past year with my holiday party. My limits were tapped, and if yours are feeling that way, take a step on back. It's okay. You're allowed to prioritize self-care and set aside time for you or activities or whatever you need to recharge and rejuvenate you. If that means stepping away from your family, holidays, that's okay. Maintaining your boundaries is what's going to help prevent burnout, which we talked about on a past podcast. And this is also going to help you fill up your own cup, whatever that means for you. For me right now, I'm in a slow stay-at-home mode. I'm in a crafting mood, and I'm just in the mood to be melting in at home. So do you, okay? Like I said before, do you, boo. This is your life. Lastly and finally, let me leave you with this. It is okay to say no when something doesn't align with your boundaries or values. Let me give you permission. Practice setting beliefs and declining requests that you do not feel comfortable with. And it's okay if you find it challenging to establish or maintain boundaries. I do too. You can seek support from a therapist, counselor, or trusted individuals who can provide guidance and encouragement. I can provide guidance and encouragement. I just want to remind you that this is my own personal experience. My ideas are thrown into this podcast. I'm just a human living this experience, and if there's one thing that I have learned, it is that we all are living our own experiences, and they may have similarities. We may be saying yes, shaking our head, nodding in agreement, or maybe even disagreements, maybe saying yes, same, but ultimately we all get to live a different version of this life, and we are creating it. Just a reminder for you. I'm not a trained therapist, so if you need the help, please seek it, medical professional, and I just think that's important to mention here. Remember, creating boundaries is a personal process. It's going to take time to figure out and find what works best for you. Regularly assessing and adjusting the boundaries just to ensure your well-being and you're maintaining a healthy relationship with people around you. There's shitty shit when laying down the boundaries, but there's also protecting our peace, hearts, and minds, even our souls. It's just worth doing. Share what you can of you while allowing space, grace, and growth. I appreciate you allowing me into your boundaries of your mind, letting me take up space and time in your human experience. And I'm forever grateful that you are here. And you're here listening, and you come back for more. I hope that you took something away from this, and I always love to hear what you think. Please send me a DM, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever. Send me an email. All of the information is down in the show notes. Leaving you with this as always. You are without a doubt a badass. Don't you forget it. XOXO. Your girl Mad. See you next time.